Happy Coronation Day, everybody. For the past few weeks, as some of you know, we have been doing a special tribute to British cuisine in honor of King Charles III. Well, today is the culmination of 8 months of waiting for that momentous occasion. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Dinners with Tina. We've certainly had a lot of fun exploring British cuisine this month. But today is the crowning moment, the final episode of our Coronation series. While a month is certainly a very long time to wait for someone to receive a jeweled headpiece, it's nothing compared to King Charles's anticipation, who have been a king in waiting since he was 3 years old, 70 long years. Of course, as Americans, we don't necessarily have any say in the matter. Not since 1783, in fact. But we still love all the pageantry and tradition of the British monarchy. So, in honor of their new king and all of our friends from across the pond today, we will be drinking English tea and making another quintessential staple only found in the United Kingdom. And that is, of course, minced meat. Now, what is that, you ask? Minced meat is basically chopped or minced oranges, apples, raisins, or any fruit that's usually in season. It's cooked in its juices until it's reduced and mixed with nuts and a generous splash of brandy. Actually, we're going to be making a Bakewell tart with a layer of minced meat. Now, I really wanted to do a whole episode on the intricacies of making homemade minced meat. Unfortunately, the dish has to preserve for a month, ideally, before it can be used. On a side note, did you know the original minced meat actually has chunks of meat in it? It was a preservative method to extend the life of foodstuffs before refrigeration. Nowadays, most recipes will call for beef suet or the raw hard fat of beef, lamb, or mutton found around the loins and kidneys. I think this pie has enough artery clogging ingredients, so we're not going to be using that today. Bakewell tart is a very simple, flavored, cake-like filled tart, or frangipane, as the French would say, which is topped with sliced almonds and drizzled with icing. When the tart has cooled, it's drizzled with plain sugar icing. My blood sugar is going through the roof just talking about it. This is a fairly easy tart to make. The hardest part, apart from waiting a month for one of my ingredients to fully set, was finding the right pan to use. The tart pan is wide and shallow, while a pie dish is smaller but deeper. So this is a tart pan and this is a pie dish. But if you're having a problem like I did of finding a tart pan in your area, you could certainly use a 9-inch springform pan. Its removable collar will help to release your crust without damaging it. Of course, the easiest solution, which we're going to be using today, is to use our handy-dandy, completely American pie tin. But of course, this is a tart, so a tart pan is best. Now for our tart shell, we're going to be using 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a pinch of salt. Now I add salt to my crust because it makes it flaky and it cuts down on the sugar too. Okay, then 1 stick of good quality butter. Use real butter. Okay, and then a teaspoon and a half of sugar. Again, this is up to you. You could not use sugar on your crust if you want to. I also use, instead of real sugar, I use my stevia, which of course is better if you're diabetic. Okay, and last but not least, about 4 to 5 tablespoons of ice cold water. So what I usually do is I put ice in a cup and then just put water in it, and that should be good enough for your ice water. Okay, for our filling, we're going to need our mincemeat that we talked about. So this is about 5 to 6 tablespoons of mincemeat. Now, if you don't have mincemeat, or if you don't like mincemeat, you can use jam, any flavored jam, for this tart. Okay, but I prefer the mincemeat. It's so very British, isn't it? Okay, and then we're gonna need 1.5 sticks of butter, 3/4 cup of sugar or stevia. This is stevia. 3/4 cup of ground almonds. Now this is, you can find this at any grocery store. It's usually by where the low sugar, the diabetic aisle, I call it. But yeah, this is ground almonds. And by the way, if you're diabetic and trying to cut down on your carbs, this is a good substitute for flour if you want to bake your own bread. Okay, and then we're going to need 2 eggs beaten, and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. You don't have to add this if you don't want to. Some people don't like the taste, but I actually do love the taste of almond extract. Okay, and then we're going to need about 3/4 cup of flaked almonds. Okay, and this is for our topping. Okay, so we're also, now this is optional. You could use, a lot of people would put icing on top of the tart. I prefer not to use the icing because, again, this is going to be sweet enough. But if you want to use icing, all you have to do is really sugar, like confectioner sugar or just regular sugar with a little bit of milk. And just stir that around until you get the icing consistency, and then just drizzle it over your top, okay? And that should be good enough. Again, I'm not going to use that because, again, it's going to be too sweet. All right, so that's it. Very simple, but utterly delicious. So let's put on our crowns and get this party started. So first, as always, we're going to preheat our oven to about 400 degrees. Okay, next we're going to work on our pie shell. Place the flour. This is our flour. And our salt into a bowl. Okay. Don't be afraid to just use your fingers on this one because we're going to be making pastry shells. And then, again, with your fingers, just rub in your butter. It helps if it's a little softer and not really solid, but we're just going to place it inside our flour like this, and we're going to pinch it. Okay, we're going to keep pinching this, incorporating it into our flour until it's like breadcrumbs. Okay, and just like when we did our Irish biscuits, the purpose for this is so it becomes light and airy and flaky. And that's what we want. Flaky crusts. Okay, so you're just gonna keep pinching the flour in, or the butter into the flour, fully incorporating it. Until the mixture kind of looks like breadcrumbs. Okay? And then we're going to add, to this we're going to add the sugar. Again, if you prefer, you can use stevia instead of sugar. It pretty much has the same consistency as sugar and works really well for baking. You can use it measure for measure, like regular sugar. Okay, now to this, we can now add our ice water. Okay, so we're gonna add about 4 to 5 tablespoons of ice water. Just drizzle it into our batter or our flour. And keep pinching that flour so it's completely incorporated. You can also use a food processor for this, but I kind of like using my fingers when I'm baking. Okay. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll this out in our floured surface. We're gonna lightly flour the surface and we're gonna roll this out, okay? So just lightly flour, not too much. And spread that around. Okay, now we're going to kind of lightly or knead this until we can get a pie shell out of it. It helps if you use a rolling pin for this, actually. Okay, so we're going to just knead it some more in a little bit, just for a little bit. And then with our rolling pin, we just kind of flatten it out until we can get a big enough circle that we can put it in our pie shell. Okay. This is a very forgiving dough, actually. So even if it breaks apart, you can just put it back together and just flatten it out again. Okay, so we're going to keep flattening this out. until we get a good enough shell that we can put it in our pie shell. Okay. And here's our pie shell. Now this, after you put it in your pie pan, basically we're going to pop this into our fridge for about 30 minutes. Now using a fork, we're going to press the tines into the bottom. Make sure you make holes in your pie shell. That way it can vent. The bottom of your pie shell and the sides. Okay. Like I said, this is actually a very nice dough. It has like the consistency of a cookie. Okay, and then you're gonna also pierce the sides. Put holes on the sides so that can vent too. Okay. Now this is a bit tedious, but trust me, it's worth it. Okay. Now we're gonna put this into our oven. And again, that's for a 400-degree oven. And we're gonna bake it for 20 minutes until it's cooked, but not completely. That's why it's, bake it for only 20 minutes. Okay, we're gonna pop it into our oven. Okay, and then we're gonna come back and start our filling. Okay, so here is our pre-baked shell. And we're going to take our mincemeat and we're gonna spread some of this at the bottom of the crust. Okay, just enough to cover it. Don't fill it. It's just for the cover, for the bottom. Okay. Just remember, this is not really our filling. It is kind of like the bottom crust for our pie. Okay, so the point is that every time you take a bite of the pie, you will get a little bit of mincemeat with it. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to put this aside, and we're going to, I've already melted our butter, so we're going to melt this butter, our butter. It's a stick and a half of butter into a pot. Okay, once it's melted, we're going to stir in our sugar. Oh, hang on one second. Okay, so we're gonna stir in our sugar, our ground almonds, okay? You stir that around. Make sure your almond is incorporated very well so there's no lumps. Okay, and to this we're going to add our eggs, 2 eggs beaten. And we're going to add a little bit of our almond extract. Okay, so that's our filling. And we're going to add this to our, on top of our minced meat. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to just spread our almonds around. And we're going to bake this for about 35 minutes. If the almonds begin to brown too quickly, you just cover the tart loosely with aluminum foil so it doesn't burn. So we're just going to cover it with almonds. Like so. Okay, now we're going to pop this into the oven and we're going to wait in 35 minutes. Okay? Okay. And here is our pie. Now keep in mind, because of the minced meat, this pie is very sweet. So be mindful of your sugar content. But if you prefer, you can use confectioner sugar or just regular sugar combined with cold water or milk to top your tart. So just melt it together and just drizzle it over your tart. Again, not too much. This is already sweet. Make sure it isn't warm or the icing will not look as pretty as it should. Allow the icing to set before serving. Okay? Now you can leave off the icing if you prefer a less sweet tart. Actually, I prefer it this way, without the icing. This pie is meant to be a perfect balance of sweet from the sugar with a little bit of tartness from the minced meat. Okay? Okay, before we try our pie, if you like our content, please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe so we can notify you when we upload new contents. Now, I think it's time for us to sample a slice of British tradition with a nice cup of tea, English tea, and join our English friends as they celebrate their new king. To King Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and her other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, the thunder of the faith. God save the King.